Last week, it was revealed that Hasbro, the company that owns both Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, is laying off nearly 20% of its workers and employees. Hasbro CEO Chris Cox announced layoffs for 1,100 workers in Monday's memo to employees, and these cuts follow 800 or so jobs that were already eliminated earlier this year. While layoffs such as these are absolutely heartbreaking, especially when you factor in that they occurred literally 2 weeks before Christmas, what's further shocking and disheartening is that the Wizards of the Coast department, the only part of Hasbro that is earning profits and, for years now, has consistently and dramatically increased those profits, was included in the layoffs. Many Magic the Gathering, as well as Dungeons & Dragons players, are asking the question, if our games are the ones that are making record profits for the company, why are the people who work to make those games and earn those profits losing their jobs, and right before the holidays, no less? Further questions of what these layoffs could mean for the very games that we all love, namely Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, are certainly valid as well. This video will explore these questions, as well as just how did we get to this point? But before even that, I'd like to begin this video with the following. There are no easy answers, and certainly not any from me, a creative writing major and former community college English teacher who went on to a successful career in reviewing cardboard and cardboard accessories. But even I can see that despite the financial difficulties at Hasbro as a company, no one at Wizards of the Coast should be losing their jobs when their department and their games have not only been profitable, but have been the only profitable thing at Hasbro. This entire situation is both heartbreaking and, as I'll explore in a moment, destructive to the very games that are actually earning a profit. The games that have touched and changed so many of our lives. But before I speak on that any further, let's begin with the first question. How did Hasbro get to this point, and just how important to them is the Wizards of the Coast department and properties like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons? Let's start by looking at the numbers. According to consumer research from Circana, toy revenues in Q3 of 2023 decreased by 8% across the entire industry. There are two big reasons for this. First, the height of the pandemic coincided with record profits in a number of industries, including toys. Second, record inflation in 2023 has led to more and more consumers allocating their money elsewhere. Hasbro's revenue over the past few years reflects this trend. Hasbro's gross annual profit in 2021 was $4.49 billion, a 19.92% increase from 2020. However, their 2022 gross profit was only $3.94 billion, which, despite still being profit, is a 12.2% decline. 2022 is also the year that current CEO Chris Cox took over at Hasbro, after being president and CEO of Wizards of the Coast since 2016. According to this Hasbro proxy statement from April 2023, a major component of Cox's operating plan for the company, known as Blueprint 2.0, is what he calls an operational excellence program, with the ostensibly simple goal of generating between $250 million and $300 million in savings for the company by the end of 2025. The plan laid out in this document to achieve this goal includes executing operational savings initiatives and focusing on fewer, bigger, and more profitable brands. Now, you would think that Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons would be the very same quote-unquote bigger and more profitable brands to focus on, and you'd be right. According to this graphic from that same shareholder report, basically all positive growth for Hasbro as a whole in 2022 came from Wizards of the Coast and the digital gaming division. Magic crossed $1 billion in annual revenue for the first time in 2022, with massively successful releases like Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Brothers War, and the Warhammer 40k Commander decks leading the way. Hasbro's Q3 2023 earnings, released on October 26th, reflect this trend as well. Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming grew a massive 40%, driven mostly by digital and licensed gaming. The gaming division's revenue more than doubled compared to 2022, thanks mostly to the massive success of Baldur's Gate 3. Magic the Gathering was no slouch either, with tabletop sales increasing by 18%, and Lord of the Rings: Tales of Middle-earth becoming the best-selling Magic the Gathering set of all time. Across the rest of Hasbro, though, things weren't so rosy. Revenue in their consumer products division dropped 18%, while the entertainment division dive-bombed by 42%. Hasbro attributes some of this operating loss to the writer and actor strikes that took place throughout 2023. E1 Entertainment, the film distributor owned by Hasbro, also saw very disappointing results at the box office throughout 2023. It's possible that Transformers: Rise of the Beasts is the only film they released that actually made money this year. That leads us back to the present day, where 1,100 people have just been let go by Hasbro. And our original question, why and why now? According to Chris Cox's statement that accompanied the layoff announcement, to position Hasbro for growth, we must first make sure our foundation is solid and profitable. To do that, we need to modernize our organization and get even leaner. While we see workforce reductions as a last resort, given the state of our business, it's a lever we must pull to keep Hasbro healthy. A lever that we pull to keep Hasbro healthy. Well, there's no doubt that Hasbro as a whole is not doing as well as it could be, but Wizards of the Coast as a segment seems to be quite healthy. Not only that, but Wizards of the Coast is actually increasing profits. Why then was this lever pulled on Wizards of the Coast? Among those who lost their job was Megan Donahue, who was the director of Magic the Gathering's Universes Beyond production and creative team. Say what you will of the choice to bring in outside IPs to Magic the Gathering from a player or game perspective, but financially speaking, Universes Beyond has been a huge success financially. And as we mentioned, Lord of the Rings was the best-selling set of all time. And the person in charge of this just lost their job? How is that healthy? And what kind of environment does it create when success, both in the products that you make and the profits that you earn for the company, can and will still result in you or your coworkers being fired? It is hard to see how this contributes to an environment where people will still strive for success. Baldur's Gate 3 was also a huge financial success for Wizards of the Coast this year. And while that game's success obviously is a result of Larian Studios who actually made the game, indeed there were people at Wizards of the Coast and D&D that were assigned to Larian, made the correct judgment call to give them carte blanche control of the IP in this game, so much so that Larian wanted to thank them for believing in them, for having the good judgment in working with them, but couldn't because they're apparently all gone. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 was a game that was over half a decade in the making, so of course some of the original team may indeed have moved on from Wizards of the Coast in that time, but that anyone from such a successful project should be swept up in layoffs like this, again, seems to go against the idea of building a healthy company for tomorrow. That nearly no one seems to even be left at Wizards of the Coast to be congratulated for their work with Larian on Baldur's Gate 3 is absolutely shocking. Honestly, anybody involved in that at Wizards of the Coast should be up on a pedestal right now. And just think of all the overall talent that may have been lost in these layoffs. At a time of record growth and record profits, Wizards of the Coast should be retaining talent and, expanding. We need more talented people investing their efforts and their time into card design, product design. I'm pretty sure Arena could use a lot more invested into improving it. But now we've got fewer people trying to do the same. What effect will that have on the game in the years to come? Does Hasbro really need to fire people from Wizards of the Coast to remain healthy? Have all other options been exhausted? What alternatives might there be to firing the people from the department that is actually succeeding? The first and most obvious is executive and shareholder compensation. According to Hasbro's 2023 proxy statement, in 2022, CEO Chris Cox took home almost $9.5 million in total compensation, nearly triple the $3.7 million he received in 2021. Hasbro CFO Deborah Thomas took home $6 million, while Wizards of the Coast CEO Cynthia Williams took home $6.5 million. Based on precedent and the general top-heavy nature of U.S. corporations, it's not wild to speculate that these numbers will increase in 2023. And I must say that if you are turning to a last resort to right the ship, perhaps you could start at least with the bonuses for some of the folks at the top who are ostensibly steering it, yet still taking home millions in bonuses. And I'm just talking about bonuses here. How many jobs could be saved at Hasbro if these top executives only took home a couple of $1 million this year? The loss of talent for the future, the impact on talent in the present, and just the goodwill and commitment of our customer base are all greatly threatened by things like this. There's already huge fears in the community about the effect that a continued drive for endless growth is having upon Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, and now we see that achieving that growth, as Wizards of the Coast repeatedly did, doesn't mean much in the way of long-term stability. Ultimately, trying to continuously achieve over 100% growth annually, it's not sustainable. This goes double for trying to sustain record growth from the pandemic when corporate shareholders saw a combined $1.5 trillion in gains. When your gross revenue is nearly $4.5 billion, it is not possible to sustain massive growth year after year after year forever. In Cox's statement, he claims that Hasbro workers, quote-unquote, aren't just employees. They are friends and colleagues. When I hear this, I just keep thinking of that time in 2013 where, amid terrible sales and financial performance, top executives at Nintendo took pay cuts to avoid firing staff. You know, you speak these words of family and loyalty, and then fire people without warning mere weeks before Christmas. And in the case of Wizards of the Coast, people from the one department that is keeping the rest of the company afloat. For 10 years now, I have been one of the more prominent critics of Magic the Gathering, and to a larger extent, I suppose that means one of the more prominent critics of Wizards of the Coast. Criticism, of course, can be both positive and negative, and indeed, I am proud of the wealth of content that I have made celebrating this game, celebrating its community, and of course, celebrating the people who make it. But I've also spoken out against aspects of the game that I've disagreed with, usually aspects relating to affordability, how expensive individual products are, and how expensive just the larger game itself can be. I've also criticized decisions and directions taken by the game, but all of those criticisms, all of them, come from a love of Magic the Gathering, and a deep desire for it to be the best that it can be. And in the case of the price of Magic the Gathering products, just in my wanting as many people as possible to be able to play this game. In some of these videos, I will get comments from people who don't really seem to love Magic the Gathering. They often confuse me as sharing those beliefs, when in fact, I want the opposite. My dream for this game is for more people to be able to play it. My dream for this game is that no one who loves it should ever have to leave it. Magic the Gathering has so greatly touched and changed my life, touched and changed the lives of so many of my friends and so many, many more strangers, that today I believe deeply in it and want nothing but its success. And I do have friends who work at Wizards of the Coast, though I believe many, many more people at Wizards of the Coast probably are not a big fan of my videos. They possibly disagree strongly with my opinions on what is best for the game. And I've certainly had a few conversations with some of them in person where they have expressed how deeply wrong they believe I am. And that's actually okay, because agree with me or don't, they too want what is best for the game. I've met a lot of people at Wizards of the Coast, plenty who like me, plenty more who do not, but not one of them, not one, have I ever met that doesn't care passionately about Magic the Gathering. Not one person there that I've ever met didn't dream of working at the company that makes the game because they themselves were players of Magic the Gathering. They themselves had their lives touched and changed by the game, and now they see it as a deep responsibility to be stewards of that game. So deep that they actually care when they see me saying things in my videos that they disagree with or that they think is wrong. They care because they care about Magic. They care because of how important they know Magic the Gathering as a game is. And now many of those people are out of a job, and it breaks my heart. I do not understand how there can be layoffs in the one department that has consistently been so successful. I do not understand how top executives can take home millions in bonuses on top of the millions that they already earn amid such layoffs. I do not know the answer to my own question. I'm sorry, but I just don't know why this is happening at Magic the Gathering. I just don't. I wish it weren't. It just sucks. It absolutely sucks.